So I think this is all an empty threat. And I'm really curious what exactly he's going to do on Saturday. Maybe Trump is crazy enough that he'll try to do it, and we'll see what happens. But at some point, this is really going to come back and bite him in the hiney.
So recently, John Mearsheimer went on Andrew Napolitano's podcast and talked about the backward nature of Trump's strategy for dealing with Ukraine in the proxy war versus Russia, what Trump is preparing to do, not only to escalate that war against Russia, but also prolong it potentially. So let's get his take on that. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.
President Trump issued a threat. Senator Lindsey Graham issued a threat. General Christopher Donahue issued a threat. We'll start with the president. I want your thoughts on this and how you think the Kremlin reacts to it. The president said on Monday, I forget about the 50-day days I gave President Putin to end the war. I'm giving him 10 to 12 days. And then on Wednesday, yesterday, he said, it's not 10 to 12 days. It's over Saturday. You better end the war on Saturday. Otherwise, I'm going to impose secondary tariffs on whoever buys oil from Russia, namely China and India. Is this any way to conduct diplomacy? Is this likely to affect one iota of the Russian military strategy in Ukraine?
Yeah, I don't think it'll have any effect on the Russians in terms of what they do in their war against Ukraine. I think the big question is whether President Trump would be foolish enough to put these secondary sanctions on China and on India. With regard to China, he's had to back off with regard to tariffs because the Chinese have a lot of leverage over us when it comes to rare earths and rare earth magnets. They really have a lot of coercive leverage on us. So I don't see how he can possibly get tough with the Chinese with secondary sanctions of the magnitude that he's talking about. And with regard to India, it's really quite amazing what's happening there. It looked like the United States was going to have very good relations with India, with Modi in the driver's seat in India and Trump in the driver's seat here in the United States. They have a history of good relations, but those relations have gone steadily downhill since Trump took over. And
yeah, I have to agree with this. India is actually the news right now because Trump has renewed bellicose language toward India in terms of the secondary tariffs that might be levied. But listen, this regime, Russia has been tariffed out the gazoo, and it's not really the Russian regime that pays the price for tariffs on their side. It's consumers within Russia that aren't necessarily beholden to the government, and civilians in the United States, which pay the money for those taxes. That's what a tariff is. It's a tax on a foreign good. So what makes you think that this is any kind of winning strategy? You know, this is what Trump did to some extent in his first term after Russia acquired Crimea. You know, he wasn't president when that happened in 2014, but shortly thereafter, he did levy new tariffs on Russia for that. During the Biden administration, they levied all sorts of sanctions on Russia during that time period. And now you have this energy behind secondary tariffs, and what that is it's imposing tariffs on countries that dare to trade with Russia. Well, this doesn't have any sense. It doesn't have any endgame, and it's not going to make a difference on the battlefield where Russia still controls something like 85 or 90% of the Donbass. It's a backward strategy, and it's destructive not only for Americans domestically, which would pay more money for foreign goods that they might need as input goods for their own businesses, or as consumers in an economy where many people are languishing under, high inflation and high housing costs and things like that.
If he were to put secondary sanctions on India, that would just wreck our relations with India. And that is not in America's national interest, because the United States and China have a vested interest in working together in terms of dealing with China. Furthermore, if he puts these sanctions on China and India and they actually go into effect, the end result is going to be disastrous for the international economy. So I think this is all an empty threat. And I'm really curious what exactly he's going to do on Saturday that he thinks is going to bring the Russians or these other countries to their knees.
Absolutely. I don't think it will change anything. It's just an excuse to prolong that war, in addition to the escalation that he made when he revealed that we're deploying nuclear submarines into the region if there wasn't enough provocation on the side of the U.S. to continue to maintain the support for Zelensky. And listen, Mearsheimer's right about the warm relationship between Trump and Modi, which was apparent during Trump's first term. It seems to mostly have been lost. And, India's a BRICS country, but it was headed by a leader that was extremely positive toward the United States and positive toward Trump in general. We'll have to see if that relationship declines. It's not in the U.S. interest for that to decline. India's a big trade partner of the United States, not one of the top three, but certainly up there.
I often wonder if he and his economic advisors view economics 101 the way I do, and I think you do. Who pays these tariffs? A tariff is a sales tax paid by the ultimate consumer, the ultimate user of the good. You want to buy a toaster made in China that used to cost $25, now it costs $28.50. You want to buy a Mercedes-Benz made in Germany that used to cost $100,000. Now, thanks to Ursula von der Leyen and her caving to Trump, it costs $115,000. Who's paying it? The American purchaser in the United States. Now we have this issue about whether or not the president can impose a tax, because the Congress gives that power exclusive. The Constitution gives that power exclusively to the Congress.
Well, that doesn't seem to bother him. I mean,
No.
he thinks that he's a sovereign who can do pretty much anything he wants. What I think what's going on here is that since he launched this tariff campaign, I think it was on April 2nd of this year, he's gone back and forth, but he has definitely levied tariffs on a lot of countries, and it has not damaged the American economy. So I think he believes, and his supporters believe, that Trump can levy tariffs and get away with it. There are no real costs to pay.
Well, I want to actually correct him there. I don't agree with that fully, because back in May, there were across-the-board tariffs levied that were pulled back because he extended the period through which negotiations could take place, some of which actually panned out in the form of new trade agreements, including one with China, which was a little unexpected, if you ask me. And when some of those tariffs got rescinded, that's when you saw the economy bounce back, at least in terms of the stock market and at least in terms of consumer confidence. So it wasn't that the tariffs were out there and didn't do damage to the economy. It was that when they rolled back, that damage was recovered to some extent, and continues to be so long as we keep out of this business of across-the-board tariffs. Because the end extension of this argument that, more central planning, more tariffs, more antagonistic economic theory imposed against other nations is, well, just blockade the United States. Don't allow any foreign trade in or without or outside of the country. But that's something that our enemies would do to us in wartime, what our criminal government would do in peacetime. It doesn't make any sense. And yeah, I mean, they argue that, hey, this is going to bring so much American manufacturing back, but a lot of the American manufacturing that exists relies on input goods from these foreign countries. They're backed into a corner of saying, hey, cheap goods and quality goods that Americans are willing to pay for from foreign countries that benefit them immeasurably are a bad thing. If China gives you a free television, that's a huge trade imbalance. Well, what do you get from that? A free television. If it was 1 cent or free, that's better than if it was $1 for the American consumer. These arguments that they back themselves into are so preposterous.
The consumer is not going to have to worry about paying higher costs. But I think most people, and this would include me, believe that at some point the bill is going to come due. And when it does, he's going to be in serious trouble. But for the time being, he's operating on the assumption that tariffs are the magic weapon. They bring everybody to their knees, and we're not hurt at all.
Yeah, because they've ended so many wars, right? I mean, Thomas Jefferson should have learned that embargoes and sanctions against foreign countries don't exactly end wars or keep the United States ultimately out of wars after the Embargo Act of 1807, which closed off all trade to both France and England to keep out of a European war. Well, the U.S. was just sucked into a European war a few years afterward, and it crushed the maritime economy of the United States at that point. Well, it's no different when you get into these protectionist schemes that ultimately just end up hurting the U.S. consumers more than they hurt the governments that you're trying to hurt. It just hurts U.S. consumers and some consumers in other countries. And then that foreign government, like Russia in this case, just has a new propaganda weapon against the United States. It can say, hey, it's just because of the United States that you are suffering economic woes within Russia. That's what they argue all the time. This happened in Cuba. This happens everywhere that the U.S. imposes sanctions on. It's not a good weapon. It's not a good wartime weapon. It doesn't avert war. It extends and inspires and prolongs wars.
I was on a Russian talk show called The Great Game, which is one of Moscow's premier primetime shows. And two of the other guests, both of whom questioned me, one was a Russian general, and the other was it would be like the John Thune, the leader of the majority party in the upper house of the Russian legislature. And they asked me if I thought Trump was serious about the sanctions, and they asked me why he makes these wild statements. Now, put aside my answer, but I detected from the tone of their questions, which were long, typically Russian-style questions, that they think this is just bluster, and they really, it goes in one ear and out the other when he says this kind of stuff, and they almost don't care if he imposes tariffs. They believe they're immune from his blustering.
Well, why would they? The situation on the battlefield hasn't changed after legions of different waves and phases of tariffs and various other forms of sanctions. So, yeah, I guess that's not a big surprise.
But Senator Graham threatened President Putin and said that, I'm going to use the phrase the senator used, that's a little crude, forgive me. President Trump will whoop Putin's ass. That's what he said. Cut number one.
Putin, your turn is coming. You know, Donald Trump is the Scotty Scheffler of American politics and foreign diplomacy, and he's about to put a whooping on your ass. What's going to happen here is that Trump is going to impose tariffs on people that buy Russian oil. China, India, and Brazil, those three countries buy about 80% of cheap Russian oil. That's what keeps Putin's war machine going. So President Trump's going to put a 100% tariff on all those countries, punishing them for helping Putin. Putin can live through sanctions. He could give a damn about Russian soldiers. But China, India, and Brazil, they're about to face a choice between the American economy or helping Putin. And I think they're going to come pick the American economy.
Just listen to this fraud, the chief neocon trying to fan the flames and speak to Trump's ego just to pull him more toward the neocon side. That's exactly what's happening here. This was a never Trumper in 2016, someone that echoed the Russiagate hoax, said that the president was guilty of colluding essentially with Putin in the United States, and Trump still goes on to endorse this guy and basically side with this guy on U.S. foreign policy. This guy, this neocon, a neocon of the kind that you dragged during the campaign season when you said, hey, Liz Cheney, the neocon, she wouldn't be for the wars that she supports if she was on the front lines. He's siding with this guy. And then he drags people like Thomas Massie that's like, hey, no, stick to what you said during the campaign season. That tells you everything you need to know about Trump and the U.S. foreign policy, which goes on in a neocon direction regardless of the outcome of that race.
Why they would abandon BRICS. Before you respond, I know you have a response. This is the guy that gets to whisper into Trump's ear every time they play golf and they sit next to each other in the golf cart.
Yeah.
This is a dangerous attitude, but go ahead, please.
I mean, I think that people like Lindsey Graham and many people in the American foreign policy establishment have no sense of the limits of American power, whether you're talking about military might or economic might. They think we can just run around the world pushing people around by threatening them. And if the threats don't work, we can use military force against them. Maybe you could think that way during the unipolar moment, but those days are in the rearview mirror. We now live in a multipolar world. China's a peer competitor. As I said, it's not plausible to argue that we can put 100% tariffs on China. We've gone down this road in the past few months. We tried to get tough with the Chinese, and Trump was forced to back off.
Yeah, that is the point I was making earlier. Trump backed off on those tariffs, and he's right. That's what caused there not be long-lasting economic repercussions, not the original tariff.
Furthermore, he can't do this with India. It would be disastrous for American foreign policy. So I just don't know what these people are talking about. Maybe Trump is crazy enough that he'll try to do it, and we'll see what happens. But at some point, this is really going to come back and bite him in the hiney.
Yeah, I really think so. I really don't think this will make a bit of difference in terms of the war. You know what would make a difference? It's something that we've been advocating for on this channel and this program and in my videos for a long time. It's disengagement from Ukraine. Do what you said. Get out of the business of people dying there. You know how to do that? Withdraw all aid to Ukraine. Zelensky would be forced to make a peace deal. The Europeans would have to come in and be part of it and maybe take control of their own security for once rather than relying on the European wing of the American empire, and that is NATO. And the chief bankroller behind that, which is the United States, which is taxpayers from the United States, which they get the funds through proceeds in a grand extortion apparatus known as taxation from the American people, and we don't want to support it. If you're America first, truly, which really is America only, you shouldn't want to dump $200 billion more down that drain while relying on fruitless policies like secondary tariffs that would cripple the American economy, sabotage small businesses, not help them, and destroy the consumer base of the United States. 100% tariff on China, 100% tariff on Brazil and India. It's just madness. It can't be sustained, and we benefit immeasurably from cheap goods from foreign countries. I'm sorry, right-wing populists, but protectionism is backward. It won't help, win this war. If you want your ego to somehow find a win in this, it's just going to prolong it and encourage the Russians never to disengage, while the U.S. keeps trying to antagonize Russia. It's backward. I think Mearsheimer's right here. It looks like Trump's trying to go through with the India part of it now from what's in the news, but we'll have to see where it goes. But let me know in the comments below, do you think Mearsheimer's right about this? Do you think that tariffs will encourage an end to this war or potentially prolong it? Let me know down below. And what do you think is the best policy for getting out of the empire building schemes that the US and NATO have partaken of in Ukraine? Let me know in the comments below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Judge Napolitano. He's awesome. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you will support the channel, and I'll appreciate that. I'll even tip my hat to you for that. But I'll also give you the gift of all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.